Hello, everybody. Welcome to Woman Up. My name's Leah, and I'm joined by Sue. Hi, Sue.
Hi, Leah. How are you this week?
Very well, thanks. 1 week closer.
Yeah.
Today we are joined by Sall Grover.
Hi.
Sall is a mother, an Australian entrepreneur, and the founder and CEO of Giggle, a social networking app and platform designed specifically for women. Before creating Giggle, Sall worked as a screenwriter in Hollywood for nearly a decade. Her time in Hollywood, however, was marred by negative experiences, including sexual harassment and misogyny. These situations in Hollywood led her to retire from screenwriting and return to Australia. Good for us. Feeling disillusioned and affected by her experiences, she, in collaboration with her mum, developed the Giggle app. The app was designed as a female-only platform with a focus on creating a safe and supportive space for women globally to connect without the interruptions and abuses commonly associated with mixed-sex social platforms. But surprise, surprise, men did try to infiltrate the female-only space. One particular man is currently suing Sall for alleged unlawful gender identity discrimination under the Australian Human Rights Commission Act. So I do want to talk about the court case because I don't think you've spoken about it much, lol. And I'm sure there will be some people who are watching though who don't know what's going on, and they'll probably be as stunned and bemused as we all are that this is even being given the light of day in court, but it is. But before we get to that, can you take us back to when you started the app? And did you know about the gender madness then? And did you know that this was likely to become a magnet for men trying to sneak in?
Okay, so there's two sections to that. So in terms of the gender ideology stuff, I had no idea, none at all.
Right.
I was in this I hate Trump Twitter bubble. I didn't tweet. I was just a reader of Twitter back then, and I had been. I think I had started my account like 2011 or something. And so I was in that, just it was like the lefty journalists and comedians. Like I liked their commentary on politics. So I would just read all of them. And every now and then, like I'd see a tweet, I was thinking about it recently, there would be like, like, oh, these are the two genders conservatives want or something, and there'd be some mocking meme or something. I never thought anything of it. I don't know why. I just wasn't curious. I didn't see anything. There was one guy I saw get piled on for like a misgendering thing, but again, I didn't really think anything of it because it was like he was someone that I was following. So I was like, oh, people are just being mean to this guy I like, which you see that on like Twitter all the time. So I really didn't think anything of it. I knew of the concept of like transsexuals and things like that. I'd met them especially when I was living in West Hollywood. And I don't know how. I wish I knew how, but I knew of I'd obviously heard of the concept of a gender identity, but I didn't know anything about it. I was basically being a good little lefty. I didn't question anything. I had no curiosity about anything. I had no idea. I didn't know there was anything called a TERF or anything. And so on February 7, 2020, when I woke up to being called a TERF and accused of transphobia, which is what happened. Because the TRAs had found Giggle before we'd launched or anything. I was like, what's going on? So I went and, investigated it, and it really didn't take long to discover through evidence that everything the women who were speaking up at that time, everything they were saying was 100% correct. And I was horrified. Like the things initially that made me horrified outside of what I was experiencing was what was happening with lesbians, of the sort of coercion and homophobia. And then also I was seeing, these women who were working to end female genital mutilation being called transphobic or genital fetishists or whatever because they were saying female genital mutilation. Like they were sort of sexing it, and they were using these these sex-based words. And I just was like, how could anybody be criticizing these amazing women? And then but to answer, so I knew nothing about gender ideology. I have now dedicated basically my life to learning about it. And in this coming February, it will be 4 years. So I figure I've got a bachelor degree in gender ideology at this point, or close to it. But I knew that there would be some demographic of men. And I actually thought, I got this wrong. I thought that it would be like conservative men, that sort of Tucker Carlson-esque commentator that would be like, oh, don't women have enough? And they would be critical, but we'd all just sort of go, ha, 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 whatever. And we'd all move on. And then I knew that there were men out there that always tried to, you know, obliterate women's boundaries. I mean, that's essentially why we wanted the app in the first place. So I just didn't know there was the demographic. Not that there's still that demographic and they're not calling themselves women, but I didn't know that in addition to that.
So you hadn't heard of autogynephiles? So that changes everything when you learn about that.
It does. It totally changes.
100% does. It 100% does. But I mean, while it changes everything, because you go, there is a demographic of men who the concept of just claiming to be a woman is a sexual fetish for them, and they're getting off on it. And that is the last man on earth you want in a room with women, with especially vulnerable women, but just women in general. I don't care if you're the strongest woman in the world. You don't need to be subjected to that. But at the same time, I'm very much like, I don't actually care why a guy thinks he's a woman. It could be because he is having some sort of distressing mental and emotional episode that, you know, there's some sort of delusion there, because it could only ever be a delusion. And it could be something that I might have sympathy for. You know, there could be something in his childhood that's gotten him to this point. It could be internalized homophobia, you know, this is a terror of being a man and thinking he'll never live up to the expectations of men. There could be lots of reasons why I might feel sorry for him. He's not a woman, and those issues need to be dealt with, and it shouldn't be put on women to deal with them like it's being. So yeah, my sympathy goes pretty damn quick.
You know, when you first hear the term autogynephile and you go, what did you say? Because you don't know the word, right? Now, I met with Shannon Fentiman in February, mentioned autogynephile. She never said, what's that? What did you say? And I thought, she knows what an autogynephile is, because the first reaction is, you've never heard the word, it's a tricky word, and the immediate reaction is, what did you say?
So the only way you can have like a nothing reaction to it, like sort of we are right now, is if you've found out so much about it, it's like common knowledge to you now. At the time,
I said, she knows what an autogynephile is, because, and she had someone from the Attorney General's department in on the meeting. Neither of them questioned it, and I thought, these two know what an autogynephile is.
Well, I mean, she does, because she's met with a bunch of them.
Yeah.
So, and listen to them, and gosh, she's just the worst possible minister for women.
Let's be inclusive. Anyone that identifies as a woman is a woman. And as the Minister for Women, I take a really inclusive approach. And we want to govern for all Queenslanders, but all people who identify as a woman are part of our policies and strategies to advance gender equality, because gender equality is inclusive. You know, it's not one group advancing at the expense of another. Let's be inclusive and bring everyone with us.
Actually, the only way you could have a worse minister for women is if it was an actual autogynephile.
Well, Tony Abbott was a better minister for women.
100%. This is what I hate. One of the things two things I hate about this movement is, one, it's turning women against each other. Of the women who believe men are women and the women who don't. Why are we having this internal fight? I hate it, because it's just all built on a lie. And two, I think that the trans activists have specifically targeted women in positions of power to make it seem like women are for this, so that we seem like the deranged, crazy ones. But it's like, oh, look at this powerful woman you would usually support. Now you're against her. So I think it's a tactic, because it comes down to actually how relevant sex is in society, like biological sex. Because if they just had men bringing in these laws all the time, you would go, well, this looks a bit wrong. But because they've targeted a lot of powerful women to bring in and champion the laws, it makes it look like women are all for it. And it's an optical illusion. Yeah. And those women, I think, are doing it in part to hold on to their jobs.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I think. Yeah. Or they're being paid off. to say this. I mean, how can you have the Minister for Women standing there saying that a man can be a woman?
Because she wants to keep her job. I mean, I think that with Shannon Fentiman specifically, it's really interesting that the two pieces of legislation that she has pushed through is the self-ID and then the hate speech. It's like they've given her these two really unpopular, basically Greens Party bills for her to put through. It kind of makes no sense. It just seems to be like, why would you give them both to her? You know, why wouldn't you sort of spread the controversy around a little bit? So I think there's a strategy within the Queensland Labor Party to do that, whether it's because maybe she's disposable to them. I'm not sure.
The interesting thing is, because Yvette Darth was the Attorney General, they took the portfolio of her, gave it to Shannon Fentiman and gave Yvette Minister for Health. So then Shannon Fentiman pushes all this through. Then all of a sudden, the portfolio is then given back to Yvette Darth when it was going to be smooth sailing from there, and then give Shannon Fentiman Health, which can then focus on the gender health side of it and push money through to gender clinics. To me, it just seems there's a strategy there by government.
Well, I mean, I think they're just putting to move her into health, which was something that was sort of struggling. It's the biggest minister that you can be. It's this struggling one. There's lots of problems, lots of controversy. I just think they're getting ready to throw her under the bus, to be honest. Which, it's horrible, because this is getting back to what I was saying. We want more women in positions of power, and even women I disagree with. It's not like I'm like, oh, every woman who I'll turn against a woman if I disagree with her. And if it was just I had positions of policy that were different to Shannon Fentiman, I'd be like, oh, that's fine. Like, there's lots of female politicians that I'm like, I just really don't agree with you, but yay for you getting there, because I know it would have been hard. You've worked really hard to get there. But with Shannon Fentiman specifically, my issue is this is someone who, like, she met with you, Sue, because you live in her electorate, but she wouldn't meet with any other Queensland woman to talk about the self-ID laws because she claimed we weren't constituents. And it's like, I'm not meeting you as an MP of Waterford. I'm meeting you as a Queensland woman, and that makes me one of your constituents. And she refused to meet with us. And that's just someone who's not doing their job and then doing policies that are actually the complete opposite of what she's supposed to be doing. So it's not like you're not just bad at your job, you're actually doing the opposite of what you're supposed to be doing. And so I can't support that. I can't support anyone doing that. It's beyond difference of opinion at this point.
Yeah, even if it was a man in that role, it's not targeting. Yeah, it's just a horrible piece of legislation.
So do you think they're worried about the outcome of your case, Sal?
I know that they're aware of it because when you do a constitutional challenge, all of the state and the Commonwealth Attorney General are put on notice about it, and they can choose to intervene in federal court or not. And it's pretty normal that they just wait until High Court. They don't really care about federal court. But we know that there's been interest. They've all like deferred to like for now, which fine. But they I can't imagine what they're actually thinking. And part of the reason I can't imagine what they're thinking is because these people have never actually had to debate their position on this. So I don't know if they're sitting there scrambling, practicing how to debate a man as a woman. They've never had to. And so they might be really annoyed that might happen. Oh, well.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to see that happen.
Yeah, and the beauty is federal law overrides state law.
100%. That's why, like with Tickle v. Giggle, like if we want to get into that, so it's a federal court case, which means it engages in this Federal Sex Discrimination Act. And that act overrides all state laws have to be in accordance to the Federal Sex Discrimination Act. So say we win, and it can even be in federal law, but definitely in federal law, we would have set a precedent. If we win in federal court, we've set a precedent, yay. We win in the High Court, and then that is beyond reasonable doubt, sex has been established as the thing for the Sex Discrimination Act. Like, who has to pay $1 million to say that biological sex is what the Sex Discrimination Act is about? This is ludicrous, but here we are. But it would mean that all state gender laws are now, would then be in conflict with federal law. So they have to scurry around and redo them. So we win in High Court. It doesn't mean like overnight, it's like, oh, it's all fixed. It means the groundwork is there for us to go and mop up all the other little messes. And it would be much easier to do. Like at the moment, they don't listen to us because they have no mandate to. They have no mandate to pass these laws either, but they have no reason to listen to us.
So the court case, the federal court case is in April, isn't it?
Yep, 9th to the 12th of April next year is the hearing. And so that's how it works basically. Federal court is like the facts of the issue. So it will be his side. Tickle will be like, these are all the facts that led up to and why I think that this is gender identity discrimination. My side is these are all the facts from our perspective, and this is why it's not gender identity discrimination. Then each side has their legal arguments. So Tickle's legal argument side is basically the Australian Human Rights Commission, who intervened as amicus curiae, which means friend of the court. And amicus curiae is there to interpret the law. So the Australian Human Rights Commission, the Sex Discrimination Commissioner, wants to be involved in this because they lobbied this law, these amendments, the 2013 amendments that put gender in the Sex Discrimination Act. So they're there interpreting the law that it is completely for gender and that humans can change sex. They say that biological sex is not binary and it can be changed. There's even one part of their submission where they say that a man who claims to be a woman, it's not the words they use, but my version of it is a man who claims to be a woman. If he has a desire to be pregnant, that is sufficient evidence that he is a woman. Like, it's sickening, the stuff that they say. It drives you to drink. But so that's basically their legal arguments is the HRC/Sex Discrimination Commissioner interpreting the law. Our legal arguments is basically the constitutional challenge to say gender shouldn't even be in there. This case shouldn't even be happening. And so what it comes down to in federal court, the nitty-gritty of it, of like he said, she said, I mean, you know, you go through the motions and it's all part of it. But this case comes down to, is this a woman? Is this man a woman? So it's why it's one of the first cases, if not the first case in the world, that's actually testing in legal terms what is a woman, like really directly. Either the law says that this man is a woman or they don't. So what we have on our side is reality, facts, billions of years of evolution, the fact that no human being has ever changed sex. I mean, just all the basics. What they have on their side is the AHRC interpreting the law for the judge and saying this is what it is. And so a judge, you know, obviously a judge does his own work as well. It's not that he just sits there and does what anyone else says. But, you know, I mean, we all know that the ideological push of this is significant. It's nothing to think that, like, I'd never ever sit here being confident, like overly confident or anything, but I'm always confident in the sense that I just think that reality and common sense and the truth win out eventually. Whether it's this time or the next time, whatever it is, it always wins. It has to. Human beings wouldn't be where we are, like even as society in a whole, if common sense didn't win out. And like, you know, because that is actual progression. You know what I mean? It is how we get there. Like all of this that's happening at the moment, it's such a regression. We're not actually going further as a society. So no, I feel confident in that. But basically, whatever the outcome is in federal court, then there's the option for either side, the losing side, to appeal to the High Court. So if it's us, we'd definitely appeal to the High Court. I assume the other side would. And in the High Court, that's where it's not like just like the day-to-day, you know, housekeeping facts or anything. It's the law. That's where they study the law. Like, has an error in law been done in federal court? And so if it was to be that gender identity supersedes sex in the Sex Discrimination Act, the argument would be that the major error in law has undertaken, and the reason is that's not enough of an argument. The argument then has to be like, can they even have gender identity in there in the first place? So you need, this is where you need like the evidence of everything. And the Australian Sex Discrimination Act exists because we're a signatory of CEDAW, which is the, the Convention of just to end discrimination against women. That, yeah, I think it's so when in 1983, when Australia became a signatory and CEDAW, we then had to basically put that into effect, like do something with it, and that's when they created the Sex Discrimination Act. Now, in CEDAW, there is no mention of gender identity. In fact, you could say what CEDAW is a convention that wants to stop gendered stereotypes harming women.
Mm.
So it's almost like the complete opposite, like you said, with everything with gender ideology, it's the exact opposite that's true. So you have the Sex Discrimination Act has to follow CEDAW. CEDAW does not accept gender identity. Then in some time, like the 2010, something like that, there was this document called the Yogi Carter Principles, which was basically just like a conference with a bunch of human rights lawyers where they sat around and talked about sexual orientation and gender identity rights, which would have been a weird conference because those two things, again, are in conflict. Like, how do they even get there? But anyway, so the Yogi Carter Principles are essentially the minutes of that. It's a memo, basically. It's the minutes of that. This is not a ratified document. It has been rejected by the UN on multiple occasions. The signatories of CEDAW, like CEDAW has not accepted it. The signatories of CEDAW have not accepted it. To get, I think it's 189 signatories of CEDAW, you have to get all of them to ratify this, like to sign this. It hasn't happened. And so because of that, the Yogi Carter Principles are not an argument for why gender identity can supersede sex in law, but the activists have been using it that way. So it is blatantly obvious that gender identity shouldn't be in the Sex Discrimination Act, but you have to
nothing shocks me anymore though. What I can't get my head around is if it did win that gender identity trumped sex, how is there any solid basis for that when you've got this man who is taking you to court? Not only does he look like a fucking Cornish pasty, he sounds completely like a dude.
I do.
He said multiple times that he doesn't pass as a woman. He's got like 20 comments online saying that he doesn't pass as a woman. He'll never pass as a woman. So how is there a solid basis for gender identity? You just have to, take the man's word for it at exactly that moment in time that he is a woman.
In the AHRC submission into this case, which is everyone can read, if you just go to the federal court website and search Tickle v. Giggle from the AHRC submission. So it's there, it's 28 pages. And as like just literally don't even pour a glass of wine, just open the bottle. It's like you'll be drunk by page 2. One of the things they talk about, and when they're defining what gender identity is, so they actually go beyond even self-ID. Like they say you don't even need documents. So it is just self-ID, like I'm a woman, that's it. That is sufficient for the AHRC. So that's just, as we can all recognize, so dangerous and just like catastrophic of how, I mean, what trust do you have to have in predators? They're going to go and use that to their advantage and potentially to go and harm the people who claim to be genuinely trans, if you know what I mean, like if they've gone through the process, or these are vulnerable people to whatever extent. Like it's just there to be used and abused, this word interpretation of it. But they also talk about gendered behavior, which that's one of the ones where you go like, when you like, it's the part that makes me just sit there going like, that makes no sense to me, even in their own interpretation of it, of how I know that the activists push it, because gendered behavior, obviously there are stereotypes, so we all know what they are, you know, like men are pushy and strong and be arrogant and whatnot, and women are much more timid and submissive, blah, blah, blah. And we're constantly always trying to break out of these gendered behaviors. So to put something into legislation that says that those gendered behaviors define who you are, that's super dangerous for women in general, because what if you are then this like strong, pushy woman? what are you, a man in law?
Yeah.
None of it makes sense. But then also you could have somebody, a man who's claiming to be a woman, but then what about my lived experience, to use their phrase, of that behavior? Because with the applicant in this case, I don't find their behavior to be of the feminine gender at all. I find it to be, from my experience, of like just sort of the worst, not the worst male behavior, but obviously significantly worse, but of that worst, like just day-to-day, you know, just pushy, won't take no for an answer, doesn't care about your boundaries.
Like misogynistic.
Yeah, very misogynistic. And that's just what I expect from like a certain type of man. It would be, if that behavior was, I've not experienced that from a woman, to be honest, because if a woman, you know, is like, say, okay, if you could even take someone like Shannon Fentiman, and if you were going to look at her behavior in this through that like gendered behavior thing, and that she's just sort of being pushy, won't listen to anybody, especially won't listen to women, just pushing it through, is her behavior then that of a man? It's like, no, I would actually say her behavior is of a woman who wants to keep her job, who's worked really hard to get this powerful job, and she is just not going to upset anybody in the ranks where she could lose that job. She's not going to lose that job through us.
The interesting thing is, when I met with her, I was thinking maybe I would see an inkling of compassion towards women and our concerns. The thing that shocked me the most was she showed no concern whatsoever, and actually tried to throw it back onto us, that the problem was with us and that we were being basically hysterical. You know, like it was a measured conversation.
Yeah. So even then, like, you know, and when I'm trying to like interpret it through this lens that they have created, I'm still like, that is still, I would say, quite toxic feminine behavior. Like so just my point of it being, none of this makes sense. It's nothing. It's just people have different behaviors, and we've worked really hard for that to be able to be accepted, that women, that you can have like a woman that's kind of a nightmare, you know what I mean? Because once upon a time she wouldn't have even had that job. So we've, you know, so you go like, we've worked really hard to get here, and then to sort of have it turned on against us. And I'm sitting here going like, this behavior is male to me, to the extent that behavior could be interpreted that way. I don't think that, like in law especially, that you can put a gender on it, especially in legislation. I think it's just nonsense.
So many things that have been worked so hard for that are now just slipping away because of this. Like your conversation the other day, Sal, I thought was excellent with the lesbian YouTuber.
Oh yeah, I loved that. Was one of my, do you know what? That's actually my favorite podcast I've ever done.
I feel ashamed I can't remember her name, but
Melody.
Because you could see the cogs turning.
She is, to back up a little bit. So she's sort of starting her own podcast. She graduated, I think she studied radio, like hosting and things like that. She's really, really young, but she is on our side in the sense that she understands that there's something going on.
Yeah.
Is she full turf?
No,
I don't know.
yet.
But whatever it is, I mean, who knows? She could be. But what she did in that interview is she didn't stay neutral. She stayed as what you would want a confused listener to be, of going, what's going on here? And she kept that going, and she pushed back on me to make me articulate my point. She didn't accept a single thing I said, which is a great interview, because then it makes you sit there going like, I've got to try and explain this to somebody.
Yeah.
I can't get away with just being like, oh, you know, or whatever. Like, you've really got to state your case. And, you know, we're at the point where we can, like most of us know, like that have been studying this for 4 years and have our bachelor in turfdom. We know what the issues are and how to explain it to people. So I walked away from that interview being like, I was so impressed by her. And I was like, I just hoped that she wouldn't, I was hoping that she would release it. I was like, you know, there could be a world where she was like, this isn't worth the trouble, but she did release it. And it's gotten such a great reaction. It's really, really cool. And she's gotten attacked a little bit because people are like, oh, you know, she's being stupid or something and she believes this. And it's like, no, she was being a brilliant interviewer.
Yeah, I thought it was
I
excellent.
want to keep watching her. I hope she just sort of keeps growing this talent because she's really good.
It just reminded me of how this is slipping through though, because she's tolerant of it, and she will say, well, it's not affecting me, but it is affecting her.
It is affecting her. It's affecting everybody. Like,
yeah,
it's where we're at this point. It is, gender ideology is affecting everybody, and I actually think we're really selling it short if we just go out there and say this is just women's rights.
Yeah,
it obviously is women's rights, and we're all coming at it from that perspective, but we actually have to acknowledge that a huge percentage of men don't give a shit about women's rights.
Yeah,
and a lot of women. So that creates a lot of people who are against us, when in reality, women's rights would be saved if we actually also recognize all of the other things that gender identity is doing. And it's freedom of speech, freedom of belief, freedom of assembly, which is female-only spaces just there anyway, but also just sort of secularism and democracy. These laws were put in with no mandate. These laws were not voted on.
Yeah.
And they're constitutionally, they shouldn't be there. You know, whatever your position is on gay marriage or what we just had the voice, it was the democratic process. Like, I'm very happy, obviously, that like gay marriage is there for all like same-sex people, like attracted people who want to get married, for it to be there. Of course, they should have that right. But it is also really interesting that same-sex marriage came in what? 2017? Yeah. So the Sex Discrimination Act amendments putting gender identity came in 2013. So from 2013 to 2017, obviously sex was still relevant because they weren't allowing same-sex marriage. Like, they're different acts to a point, but in terms of, it was sex discrimination. And so obviously the AHRC, who wanted same-sex marriage, knew what sex was. And now they're trying to say that there's basically no such thing as biological sex. And you're like, well, what the fuck were you fighting for? Because we're fighting for same-sex marriage.
Yeah.
And so that's why when you say, like, they have just gone a 180 on everything. And if we can explain it to people and get it out there that, you know, that this does affect everyone, whether you are a 90-year-old man or a 3-year-old girl, everyone in between is affected. Because when you have a completely nonsensical ideology that's taking over your governments and institutions, you're in a really bad, dangerous place.
And it's also, I think, the only movement that has just taken rights for another group of people. Like with same-sex marriage, it didn't affect anyone.
Totally. The only way it could be now, like gender identity or like trans rights could be analogous to same-sex marriage, as if like the same-sex marriage was saying we all had to get same-sex marriage, then we probably would have been like, oh, I'm not quite sure I want that law. But no, it was people who wanted just the same rights as everyone else. This is people saying it's not even the same rights as everyone else. It's, we want privileges no one else has, and we will be taking rights away from you. And whether that is female-only spaces and female-only sport or freedom of speech, no one else has the right to dictate and compel someone's speech, put something like as basic as pronouns, than this group of people. It is just madness. Like, this group of people that is apparently the most marginalized and oppressed in the world. Again, it's always the opposite. It is true. They're the most powerful. No marginalized, oppressed group can get laws changed in stealth. They don't have government support. They don't have institutional support. That's why they're marginalized.
You are not going to see the government flying the suffragette flag anytime soon.
Like, even in Tickle v. Giggle, we're supposed to believe that the Tickle side's the marginalized side. It's like, you're the one with the AHRC on your side. Like, you've got the government there. I'm here trying to get everyday Australians to understand what's going on so they can like help support it, because we don't have the government on our side, and we need to make sure the people are aware of what's going on. And not that I hate the marginalized and oppressed like version of looking in the world. Like I know that it exists to a certain point, but you know, I've never lived my life thinking I'm like this poor, you know, downtrodden woman or anything. It was when I got to Hollywood and I realized after a few years, and I realized it took me far too long to realize that being female was being used against me, and there was nothing I could do about that. And because by that point I was quite emotionally damaged, so I just didn't have the energy really to work against it. Even then I wasn't like, oh, I'm marginalized. I was like, oh, I'm pissed off. And like, it was like, okay, let's do the work. What can we do? What can be the thing to fix this? And like, to cut a long story short, like my contribution was just going to be, well, I want to create a woman-only space on the internet where women can grow and get confidence and have a refuge and a break from misogyny and all of that. And that was sort of just going to be my contribution to helping women. And
so Sal, you were mentioning, I was listening to a podcast online, I think No Self ID was she was the host, and you were saying within days of you, I'm not sure that you launched the app, but you had it up and running and you got thousands of men trying to infiltrate.
Yeah, so basically in the beginning of 2020, it was on the App Store and Google Play. And we were doing, it's called beta testing. So we didn't have like all the security measures in or anything. We were just ironing it out, seeing if there were any bugs there, basically if it worked. Because once you put some users on there, so there was like just a handful of women who knew about it. We're just testing it, and it was all working. It was going really well, and we were getting so excited. And keep in mind also, the App Store and Google Play had accepted us. Like when you build an app, you have to, for every build, you have to get accepted. And we did, like, and, you know, they knew exactly what it was. It was an app for females. You know, there's onboarding security that would be a selfie that would help determine whether someone was male or female, help like our process in keeping it female only. So there wasn't even like beforehand we got like any inkling of like, oh, there's something wrong. It was just like, no, green light, like all cool, like good luck. And then like, you know, we were all talking to media, like I was talking to the project and Mamma Mia, that were like, yes, this is a bullseye for our demographic. This is a fantastic idea. So we were so excited. And then basically we woke up one morning to thousands of men. They had infiltrated the app, so we didn't have the proper security, like to be able to get on like the thing. So men could, you know, get on at that point, really no problem, because we were testing it of what the percentage would be. That was part of what we were like trying to work out. I think we had worked it out by that point. I'm not 100% sure. I can't remember. I think we had worked it out, but we just hadn't. We were, you know, probably we're going to implement it that day. I don't know. And yes, we had thousands of one-star reviews in the App Store and Google Play calling us transphobic. They were just making like rape and kill turf profiles. So we had to go through and like manually, like, you know, get all of these profiles. We're like, you know, just, and going like, what the hell is going on? Like, what's a turf? I had no idea. It was just petrifying. And from that moment, not a single one of like those media people have ever contacted, like never responded to an email ever again. Like it was just the moment we were called transphobic, we were treated as guilty. So for the last 4 years, when I've seen some pompous pricks go like, there's no such thing as cancel culture, I'm like, oh yes, there is. I've literally been living it. And they'll be like, oh, but you have a Twitter following now. I'm like, no, I have had to work my ass off to speak out about what has happened, to get some people to listen. And still, it is still so hard to get people to listen to what is going on. It's just purely like, I understand that these horrible people wanted me to just go away and never be heard.
How did you react in the beginning? Because it's horrible when you're called a TERF in the beginning.
I think like even when I started tweeting, I think I was still quite defensive. I was still in that, you know, I'm going to be really nice. And I would use terms like trans woman and stuff. It's the journey we all have. So I was like, I think that I was even a little bit that I thought maybe there was something such as true trans. I don't think that anymore. I think that there are people who have gender dysphoria, obviously, and that is a medical condition, I think that it is a scandal that that's ever been treated medically and psychologically in any way other than helping that person accept reality that they're male or female.
100%.
I don't think that it should ever be a treatment to modify one's body to something they're not. So I just don't think that obviously this thing exists in the sense that it is a concept, but I don't think it exists like, as in, you know, like a real demographic of people would exist with like an immutable characteristic. No. And so I was like, my mum was petrified and devastated and just terrified and panicking. I always, like, when really, really catastrophic things happen, I go straight into survival mode. And part of my survival mode is like, educate. Like, I'm just going to learn everything I can. And I even remember like one point, I'd been listening to everything. I still hadn't tweeted it or anything, but was listening all day, every day to everything. And I was listening to Posey Parker's interview on trigonometry that she'd done, sort of that big one, because I'd been reading, like, you know, Jane Clare Jones had written amazing things, Helen Joyce, Julie Bindel, Kathleen Stock was writing great things, but a lot of them were like, you know, it was very theory heavy, and I was reading it and enjoying it, but Kelly J's, that interview, it was so simple and just so layman, and you were just like, oh, like, this is so straight down the line wrong.
Yeah.
And it just landed. It made all the theory just get some really, like, just normal perspective. And I really, like, appreciated that. And I remember my mum said to me, why don't we just ignore it? And I remember even then going, because we can't. Like, she was like, if we just don't talk about trans stuff, if we just, you know, go on and just keep doing basically what we initially were planning to do, like, if we just like, let's not even give a second time of thought to this. And I was like, because they're not going to let us. Like, we either have to pack up or fight back. And I was like, well, we're going to fight back. And I did think that it would be over pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I just thought, and because when it's 2020, like, you know, even when you're new, you are still seeing, like, you know, new women speak up, like, every week, every day, whatever it is. Now it's much more, like, even more frequent, like, you know, sort of like, you know, 1,000 new TERF angels a day, but, you know, it's still like one or two. And so I was like, oh, like, let's see, people are realizing, like, and I told some, you know, people in my regular life, and they were all like, well, that's ridiculous. And so I just thought it would be over pretty quickly. Like, I was like, you know, it was like beginning of 2020. I was like, oh, we're gonna have a rough few months.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, I thought the same.
Yeah. I mean, I never thought that it was going to end up like that. I would be being taken to federal court. You know, I've got, like, you know, be another 18 months of this until high court resolution. I thought, I didn't know, because no one had mentioned it to me in the development of the app. I think no one had gone, hey, do you know that men are considered women in law? I didn't know that happened. That's an irrational thought. No one would be like, oh, I'm just going to go and check and make sure that women are still women in law. Because, and what I've since, like, been told very, very clearly, the Sex Discrimination Act itself was the exemption that allowed for female in spaces. You didn't have to go and ask for them. Like, it was the thing. So long as they were reasonable and proportionate to, you know, women's equality and benefiting women, it was fine. So I just didn't know we were in this new realm. Like, had I known, if in end of 2018, during 2019, if someone had said to me, oh, did you know men are women in law? And maybe I just would have been like, that's preposterous. I don't know. I mean, I would have gone and researched, so I would have found out earlier what was happening.
But even still, there was a minute amount of men that, you know, and they were ones that had gender dysphoria, had years of, you know, seeing a psychologist, you know,
But
There
I
was
think that
hundreds
I think
upon
about
thousands of them.
I do I have a thought experiment I've done for myself quite a few times is like, so say you were in a situation where there was just one man in the world who thought he was a woman, right? Well, that man would still live in a community. And so say he was, was told like, okay, yes, you literally are a woman. You can go into all these female spaces and sports. There would still be at least a few hundred women in that community who would be affected by this. And so, but it would still be just as bad as it is now. And it would probably be worse because no one would be listening to those few hundred, maybe 1,000 women who were being affected by this one man. Now we're in a situation where it's just hundreds of thousands, if not, oh my God, it feels like millions of them. Just, it's crazy. But so you go like, oh, has it, in terms of making people realize that this sort of very slow burning, really bad idea is really bad, did it have to sort of snowball to get a lot of people, for people to realize it? We wouldn't have listened to just one. That one would have still been bad for the woman who came into contact with it.
But those men had gender dysphoria, they'd say they were living as a woman. They wouldn't say they were a woman. They were living as a woman.
What's living as a woman?
Yeah, going in,
I mean, like, I don't know a single woman who lives her life exactly the same way. The only thing that binds us all together is actually the biology of it. I mean,
living as a woman is, though, you never truly believe they were a woman.
You would say, I think the correct way and how it should have always been presented is they were just sort of living with femininity. They were just doing feminine things. They like swishy dresses. Because it's always interesting, the things of like living as a woman they don't do, like the housework and all of these like gendered things that women have had to work really hard to overcome. But it's never like, oh my God, I feel like I'm a woman, let me do the washing, I've got to do the ironing. It's like, pass me the sexy lingerie and I'm going to take selfies. Like it's so, like, but even like when you look at like the history of it, of like in like the 30s and 40s and 50s, what those guys are, the sort of the erotic cross dresses, what they were called then, were doing, it was still like so sexualized. And like I always think back to like some of the guys that in West Hollywood that I met who were transsexuals. All of them were gay. I think there's about 6 or 7 guys I met. So there was a bar at the end of my street that did great happy hour. It was a gay bar. But so from 4 to 8, my friend and I would always go there because it was like 2 for 1. Like when we would like arrive at 4, leave and stuff out at 8. Absolutely plastered. But like we'd talk to them on something. They used the men's room. They had a great sense of humor about themselves. It was always like they were these gay guys who had, this really rough homophobic upbringing, and they liked makeup and dresses basically, and it sort of manifested in a certain way. And so now they just, well, at the time they were transsexuals. At no point did I ever sit there being like, oh, that's a woman, or was being told that they were. So when, even going back to what we said at the very beginning, like when prior to knowing what this mess was now, if I'd even like heard about trans rights, I suppose I would have even just interpreted that in my mind of like, oh, those guys need something, there's something specific they need. I would be like, oh, cool, I'm for that.
Don't treat them any worse because of how they're living. Don't fire them, but don't. If
we were like an actual progressive society right now, it would be as we were just saying, like, dress however you want. Like, have whatever interests you want, whatever tastes, go into whatever career that interests you. Say like hairdressing and makeup artistry for men has become very normal in like the last 20 years. More women are going into sort of, more like the mining jobs and things. Like there's been a big crossover to sort of take the biological sex element out of these jobs as much as possible, and society's better for it. Like, and if we, even if, like say like with an autogynephile, I'd be like, you want to wear a dress, wear a dress. Like probably not to work because we all have to follow dress codes. But like, if walking down the street on your weekend, your downtime, and that even I'm repulsed by the reason you want to do this, but in a free society, you can actually do it if you're just wearing like a pretty dress.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I wouldn't feel comfortable being around that, but I wouldn't, if
No,
I
I
was the
wouldn't
queen
either.
of the world, I wouldn't make it law that they couldn't do it. Like,
No, totally. And it's just, you know, I think that the compromise really ultimately is that now that we're aware of it, we're just going to have to accept that there are autogynephiles in the world. And the best compromises that we can do is go, okay, cool. Just don't come into female-only spaces, but you can live your life, like go do your thing. Just don't make it sort of anyone else's problem. Like everyone
and we are allowed to feel uncomfortable around it. Like that's our right too.
Oh, totally. Like if there was an autogynephile walking down the street, I'm crossing the street.
Yeah. Well, we also know that they are a threat to us as well.
Yeah.
So, you know,
but I will say this in the same way that if there was a nudist walking down the street, it's in the street.
Yeah.
Or you know when you see like the pup play or like a furry or anything like that. But it's like, and I know that there'd be people going, oh, would you say the same thing about a gay person? No. Because it's not a fetish. It's not a paraphilia. It's not something that is actually ultimately quite negative. It's a sexual orientation, and we all have one. There's 3 you can have: homosexual, heterosexual, bisexual. It's just totally normal. And they had to do the work because we have this horrible stigma in society. But you're not doing that same thing of doing the work to get rid of the stigma for your fucking furries. It's not the same.
Yeah.
And so I think the danger that some people are trying to make it, it's the same. But I think most people surely get to a point where they go, something's wrong here. I just don't think that furry or that pup or that guy with the beard and the dick saying he's a lesbian, I just don't think that's the same as the fight I wanted for same-sex marriage that I was really supportive of.
Yeah, 100%. Well, on that note, Sal, thank you for giving us your time. Can you tell people how to find you and how they can help with the case?
Yes, so find me on Twitter at Sal, Sall, I spell my own name wrong, Sal Tweets. And then so basically you can find out more about the case at gigglecrowdfund.com, and you can donate, which was much appreciated. I've got legal bills coming out of my ears. I also, just one thing I will say, a little like story about the crowdfunder. So we built our own crowdfund because I'd watched what had happened to the women in the UK, like they were getting kicked off GoFundMe and stuff like that. And I just didn't want to deal with that. So we built our own, so we basically had the ability to do it. But then I think it was Square was the first payment processing platform that kicked us off. Square and then Stripe, or whichever one did it first. And then we built our own sort of, not our own payment processing, but what we sort of had done and working with this other company and to try and hide it from the activists, but they worked that out too. So now we are partnered with a company called Give, Send, Go, which have assured us that they will not kick us off, but you still just go to Giggle Crowdfund and then it just sends you to their thing.
So you said Square and Stripe. What reason did they give?
It's very Kafkaesque. They don't really give you a reason. It's kind of like, you know what you did. They'll just, they sort of point, they've got general, in their terms and conditions, they do have clauses that are like, we can change our mind at any time.
But it's strange how all gender critical women are chucked off these platforms for raising money.
It is. When both times it was happening, it was so stressful because you're like, I'm just, even to try and raise the money to like defend myself and women's rights in general, like you just don't want me to be able to do it. And we know it was the activists who did it. Like I can't say exactly how, but we have seen like it was the activists. And I was just like, yeah, like where's it going to end? Because at the end of the day, I actually just want the right to kick someone off a platform. That's what I'm ultimately fighting for here, that I can say no males on a female-only platform. So if Stripe and Square have the right to kick women off who acknowledge biological sex, why can't we just kick off, have our own boundaries and our own rules? So that's why I never really criticized them, in the sense that I mean, in my response to them, I'd be like, oh, cool, how lucky for you that you get to set your own boundaries. That's what I'm fighting for.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's a fight for another day. I don't have the energy to fight square and straight as well. I was like, at one point I was like, am I just gonna have to like walk around the street like holding a cup, just being like, men aren't women.
The fight is for every gender critical woman in Australia. You're fighting on behalf of everyone here.
It's for everyone in Australia, really. Like, not that I've, you know, you don't walk, it's not how I go to sleep at night being like, oh, I'm fighting for everyone in Australia, like pat yourself in the back. But it is actually just the reality of what it is, because you know, one of the things that women have been saying is like, you know, you have to have female only spaces or organizations in general that stand up against this ideology. We did. Like, sometimes I think of it in terms of, I don't think specifically that I'm almost even being punished for you know, it's definitely not being punished for having a woman only platform, because the AHRC is all for them. They just want men included in it. So basically I'm being punished for not believing in this ideology. That's what it comes down to. I just don't believe their version of what a woman can be. And, you know, we just have to be, so you have to be able to stand up against that and fight back and say, no one in Australia or the world has to be forced to believe in ideology. And, you know, you have one organization that does it, it makes it easier for the next one. It's like when one person speaks up, it makes it easier for the next one. So, you know, we win in a high court. It means that we can go and we can start a new Girl Guides, because Girl Guides is fucked. Like, I would never send my daughter there in a million years, because they evidently make horrible decisions because they didn't stand up against this ideology. So we now have an opportunity to make a new one. We just need to make sure the law is clear, and then we can go and do that. So it's just, you know, once we can start creating these new organizations, it'll be a lot more fun than fighting for this now. Actually putting it all into action will be cool.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you, Sall. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for chatting with me. And baby girl just woke up. Perfect timing.
Good timing. All right, Sall. See you later. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.